Hey there, Internet. Alicia here of Worth Mending. I've moved since I last did one of these talkie videos, so welcome to my new living room. I haven't put a ton of thought into, I don't know, the background and stuff. I don't film these videos very often, but this is the only room in the house that we've done anything to yet, and there's this great window for light, so that checks all the boxes for those dorky technicalities on filming a video. As any repeat watchers may have been able to guess, this video is about mending a sock. I've got them all done here. Studio magic. And we're going to be using my Swift Darning loom to do so. If you're super new here, you might not even know that that is a tool that Scott and I make with Laura and Holly and other help right here in Kitchener. And I'm always playing around finding different innovative ways to show you how to use it and what it can do. Something funny about this new house is that it's actually heated with steam boilers, which is different from hot water that you might be used to if you have an older house. I don't know if you can hear it, but the steam radiators are singing in the background. But the real reason I gathered us all here today is to talk about this patchwork mending technique that I've done on the bottom of this sock. Something maybe not so stark, but that's different for me since I started Worth Mending, is that I've had access to some really awesome hand-dyed yarn that is made locally within the fiber communities that we're involved with. So I've used some hand-dyed merino to do this. To riff on Alexis of Black Forager,
use whatever yarn you got, honey.
This is a sock weight yarn, and I'm going to be actually making this very yellow patch right here with you on camera. I'll talk a little bit about considerations that I'm making as I am weaving all of these patches together. And maybe I'll just flip the sock inside out right now. I'm going to talk about one big rule that I am breaking with this technique. So you can see here that all of the patches are linked to each other and they're floating on the threadbare areas. So we are not covering the entire threadbare area with one patch, but over the entire patchwork, everything is secured and repaired. These socks are so beautiful that I am hesitant to even wear them, which is such a problem. I really need to overcome that and get these back in rotation because they are so beautiful. I also have the heel left to mend on this side. So I've done this heel, and that's gonna have to be a different video, but here's a little preview of the heel too. And I did the other sock in green instead of pink. Let's get into it. Everything here is included with the loom and weft pick option. The two things that I'm missing and you don't see in frame is the instruction booklet and the warping helper, which I forgot to use for this demonstration, but I'll link the warping helper video down below. I put the work surface inside of the sock so that everything is lined up right where I want to be making my patch. With the patchwork, I've learned that it's a lot easier to add a patch above an existing one than below. So then I'll get my loom on top and tie the t-shirt yarn around to hold everything together. Now we're ready to get warping, so I stick my needle in and bring it up again at the bottom corner of my patch. We set up the loom by taking the yarn up around each of the hooks, moving across to create those straight up and down parallel threads. This time on my first one, I flipped the hook side to side, and that's to check that I've chosen the correct hook. Flipping it showed me it's best to move that loop to the next hook beside. What's a little different here as I'm stitching across is that I'm always stitching not just through the fabric, but around to catch the yarn from the previous patch. This creates a strong link between my new patch and my previous one. Once I've gone around my last hook, since I'm using the same yarn to weave, I just bring it up where my first weft is meant to start. Then, having flipped the hooks in the direction I'm moving, I pass the eye of the needle through those loops and bring it down to the bottom. Then I take a little stitch at the side to end that row. And just like with the previous warping step, I always make sure to stitch into the yarn of the previous patch. If I miss that step and end up just creating two patches that are tight beside each other and not linked, over time it will create a weak point and almost perforate, creating a hole between your two patches. Squishing my threads down to create an even and tight weave is another strategy for creating a really strong and secure patch. I squish down with my needle on each pass, which really helps, but my weft pick is the tool that I rely on to really even out that tension. With those tips, the rest of the weaving is fairly repetitive but enjoyable to watch, so I'll just leave you here for a minute or two as I weave this, and we'll reconvene when we get up to the next skill. As I make my way up to the top of the patch, another trick that's important for me is to stitch in as normal and then angle my needle up so that it goes over the loom. That way I can pull the yarn straight up. All that squishing becomes really important so that I'm able to pass as many weft rows in as I can. Once I've packed enough rows in there, the next step is to remove the loom and finish the patch by stitching that fourth side down. You can see that I've been playing yarn chicken for a while here, and I have just barely enough left to finish up. So I'm doing a weird thing here where I'm going through all the same motions of stitching those loops down, but all in one step without having the yarn threaded through. If you'd like the full step-by-step on how I'm doing this, again, the tutorial I linked below is going to have that laid out really clearly for you. Then my weft pick comes back to help me rebound some of those rows that I squished in really tight near the top to even everything out. As you may have noticed when I showed off the inside of this sock at the beginning, I'm pulling all of my yarn ends to the inside, and that's where I end it. I gotta be honest, I have no plans to stitch those ends in. The very first time that I used this patchwork technique, that's how I did it. And it was actually for a sock that belongs to Scott. So I just turned the sock right side out and gave it back to him. And it was months until he happened to have his sock inside out and noticed that I did that. So, of course, sensory stuff is totally subjective. If those ends bother you, if they're too long, definitely take the time to stitch them in. But for me, I was able to skip that step this time. So I hope you enjoyed that. I feel a little silly sometimes making these fairly repetitive sock darning videos. This is making me feel very silly because once you do get the technique down, it's like, okay, I got it, I did it. But this idea with the patchwork darns is a little bit more of an advanced technique. You're probably somebody who's done a patch or two in your time, but I hope you learned something and maybe are inspired to look a little bit differently at the next sock or sweater elbow that you're mending. One of the beauties of it is that there really are no rules. Your visible mending is as unique as you are, and I can't wait for you to bring it into the world. We'll see you later.